Hello and a very warm welcome to the Joy of Basing Essentials with me, Matt Cexwish. Today I would like to show you a small overview on the brushes that I use for painting miniatures. It is actually very advisable to know your brushes well and know how you can use them to apply certain techniques to your miniatures. Because otherwise you will really have a hard time just achieving the techniques that we show you in our painting tutorials. So here in the middle you can see a selection of brushes that I think are essential for everyone who wants to paint miniatures with the techniques that we show. And it is actually there are quite a lot of brushes, but yeah, let me take you through why I think that they are very important for what we do. So starting from the left here, I have Windsor Newton Series 7 size 1 brush. This is the brush that I use most of the time for most of the techniques. It is a very fine brush, not the cheapest also, but it is very good in holding an extremely pointy tip. So the tip is very vital for most of the techniques that we do, and it's very important to keep it as pointy as possible, so to say. So the size 1, regular size 1 Windsor Newton Series 7 is the one that you will use the most. Generally speaking, you can see divide the brush into different parts. First you have the handle, or the stock, which is mostly built out of wood. It's not very important. I have also not seen so many ergonomic handles yet. It's just important that it has a certain length, so it won't slip out of your hands when you paint. The next part up here is the so-called ferrule. It's made of steel, and it just holds the bristles together here. It's actually this place here is actually also very important because you should not allow color to flow anywhere near the ferrule or the connection point of the bristles in the ferrule, because that will mess your brush up very, very quickly, and then the brush will not be able to hold a pointy tip for much longer. Then we have the bristles itself that we can divide in two parts. The back part here, the thicker part, is called the reservoir. The reservoir holds the most of the color when you paint. So all the colors and pigments are stored in there. And then the very end here obviously is the point, which, as I explained before, it's really important that it is very precise and very, very, very pointy. Some people they think that achieving a very fine painting result, for this that they will have to have a very small brush, for example like this 0.4 brush from Leonardi here, which is very, very small, but that is not necessarily true. If you look, I'm not sure if you can see that, but the tips are more or less the same size. So the only thing where this differs is the bristle length and obviously the size of the reservoir. So while you actually have a lot more control with the small brush, you will not be able to paint as long as you can with the size 1 brush because the reservoir is bigger. So this is something that might come as a surprise to some, but that's how it is. The next brush here is Windsor Newton Miniature Series size 1. It's actually also a size 1, and it's really interesting to see these two in comparison. The handle and the ferrule are the same size, but then in the very tip you see that the miniature series brush is significantly shorter than the regular series 7 brush. And this is actually something that's also very important about brushes. The longer the bristle size, the longer the bristles are, the less control you will have over your stroke. You can imagine it a little bit with a rope that you pull behind you, and when you will do a change with your hand, the longer the rope is, the more time the bristles will need to react to your move, because they are longer. So it will take them longer to fall into the movement that you do. While with a shorter brush, you can make a move, and the bristles will follow way quicker. Especially for techniques like the loaded brush technique, that makes a difference, because you will be really able to control where the pigment is released from the brush onto the surface much better. But the thing is that, again, like with the miniature series, you have less reservoir also, so you will run out of color quicker. So these two brushes are the ones that that we use most of the time. Also the Windsor Newton Series 7 size 2 brush, which is like a bigger version, the bigger brother of the size 1. And again, like this has a much bigger reservoir. Also the same pointy tip too, but with this you will be able to paint for much longer time. So we usually use this kind of brush for putting in on the first colors, the first couple of colors, and then we continue detailing with the smaller brushes. Then we have one quite special brush here, which is a brush that I've been using quite long. I've not seen anyone using a brush like that so far in miniature painting before, other than me. I call this brush a Gypsy Brush. It's called a Gypsy Brush because it's a salvaged Series 7 brush, where I cut off the bristles very near of the ferrule here. Actually, I do this with all of my decommissioned Series 7 brushes. As soon as they cannot hold a tip, I cut them into a Gypsy Brush. And this brush is extremely useful to really quickly go in and remove mistakes that you make. So I usually have this Gypsy Brush somewhere here on my painting setup, and then when I paint something on a miniature, then when I make a mistake, I really quickly drop this brush, take the Gypsy Brush, and start to kind of erase the mistake that I have made without having to brush lick the brush or do something stupid. So the Gypsy Brush is very good for erasing these little mistakes really quickly, but it's not limited to that. Another technique that this Gypsy Brush can do is, for example, to distribute and blend metallic pigments very locally. So when I put metallic pigments somewhere on a miniature, I can go in with the Gypsy Brush and just smudge the pigment down the surface that I'm painting, which is extremely useful. And also when I have something like a very small hair or fur detail, I can use that to dry brush the surface. That being said, this brush is quite damaged, so the bristles will continue to fall out over time. So a Gypsy Brush's life is also quite limited. I don't know, it holds around maybe 2 or 3 weeks, and then I have to harvest the new Gypsy Brush. Okay, besides these main 4 brushes, I have some brushes here on the side. One brush that is also quite important, but it's also the most abused brush. It's a brush that I use to remove color or put the color really quickly from the pots onto my palette. I use that. This is like a Games Workshop, just large brush. Doesn't really matter what it is, as long as it can remove paint from a pot. yeah, this brush will suffer, you know, it will be covered in paint over the time and it will look just awful, but still it is good to have a brush like that. I've seen people using also like these little coffee stirrers, for example, like that, to remove color from their pots. Or some people have filled all of their colors into little dropper paint pots, but I think that's a lot of hassle, so I just have the Games Workshop abuse brush. Then we have these two brushes, which are dry brushes. I have a bigger dry brush, like this one here. It's also, this one is from Games Workshop. It's a large flat dry brush, like this. And I have a smaller dry brush, which is also flat. So you might be able to see here. And that's actually also a pure red sable brush from Colibri in this case. It's good to differentiate the dry brushing process into smaller brushes also. That will keep you from going just too crazy with the dry brush. So this one is for regular dry brushing, and this is for something that we call selective dry brushing. Yeah. Okay. Then in my little box, my brush box that I also use to travel around, I have a little needle tucked in here. This is actually the prettiest needle that I could find on a flea market. It's made of silver, but I use this one to quickly pop open color pots, for example, like especially these dropper pots when they are clogged. I can really quickly go in here and unclog them, just like pop them like that. Okay, and then last but not least, in the setup, I have a little brush cleaner here in my box all the time. That's a little brush soap. This one here is called the Master Brush Cleaner. And it's very useful to clean your brushes after each painting session. So when I'm done painting for the day, I just take a little bit of water, dab my brush in like that, and then I use the side here to also remove some excess pigment like that. Clean the brush up a little bit more, roll it around, lick it obviously, and that the brush is just perfect for the next day. Okay. Besides all of these brushes, I also have some like special use brushes that I have also around. This here, for example, I use nearly exclusively for cleaning dust from my models or like little particles. It's quite practical. It's a synthetic brush from Colibri, and yeah, you can really use it to get rid of all this dust very, very quickly. They are really very, very different brushes that all serve a purpose. This one here, for example, is a synthetic brush also that I used for splatter effects and like gore effects really quickly. You can also blow against that. So you put the color on here, go close with your face, and then do this, and then all of the little splatters will occur on your model, but be careful because this can also really mess your paint job up. And then we also have this is actually also a brush that I use for painting. This is a rubber brush, and some of you might be surprised because rubber brushes you usually use for sculpting, but in this case it's very useful to have a rubber brush when you, for example, apply silicone milk to mask something up really quickly. You don't want to use that on your regular brushes because they will just be destroyed. And with the rubber brush, the tip is here not affected by anything, not by putty, super glue. You can just super glue you should not put on here because that would be difficult to clean. But all the other things you can just scrape off, and that's it. As good as new. Okay, so that much about the brushes. I will also tell you a little bit about the painting setup in general. When I paint, I have 3 cups with water, most of the time, And this is because I have 1 cup for regular pigment-based colors here. I have 1 cup for metal pigments, and I have like a neutralizing cup if I have to switch between metal pigmented colors and non-metal pigmented colors. So when I paint with metal pigments, I really like to get to go back and forth. I don't want to save painting with metal pigments for the very last, but this is why we need to be really, really careful about your painting hygiene, so to say. So yeah, the metal pigments, when as soon as they reach your non-metal pigment color, they will all mess the whole color up. So I try to keep them separated. I also have these little shot glasses that I use for medium tones. When I mix something up, especially for like with airbrushes, I have these little cups, and then I have a dropper when I can really quickly remove the color and store them in these backup cups here, so to say, have them for later. It's also good to have little shot glasses that you can actually seal off. I mostly use like cellophane, but yeah, something with a lid would actually be pretty nice. Okay, what else? Maybe I will also show you the wet palette. There are a lot of tutorials available out there how to use a wet palette properly, but I can show it to you really quickly. For me, it's basically just a plastic container that I use. I have used also metal containers, but they begin to rust. I have also used aluminum containers, but most of them were not so tight also, so they begin to leak. So a plastic container is actually really practical. I got this one, I think, from the Home Depot or something. It says here from Hema. I think this is actually also from the Netherlands. So in here I have a little sponge. Ideally it would be a bright sponge, not a dark sponge, so you can see the colors better that you put on here. But yeah, you put the sponge in here, then you have some water, which you can put into your wet palette. Make sure that the whole sponge is soaked with the water. And yeah, it should not be a moist palette, but really like a wet palette, so use quite some water. There are actually also some systems that use different layers, for example a copper layer to get rid of mold, or some special sponge that is repelling these little mold particles that will happen when you have something that is humid for a long time. But I just remove that as when it gets too nasty, like too gunky. I just quickly remove that. I also use some chlorine to disinfect, so to say, the sponge from time to time. You can also put it in the microwave. But yeah, this paper here is actually like a parchment paper, baking paper. The thing is, it's very difficult to get the exact right one, the exact right paper. This here is white, which is extremely useful too. Yeah, because you can see the colors much better. But you see that when I put this on here, it really changes the color because the sponge is dark. So we need one layer of paper towel to put that in between. So yeah, have some of the paper towel like this. Fold it up a couple of times. Then you can also cut that to size with some scissors. And then we put that in. Some more water. Okay. And now we have the parchment paper. What I like to do is to put it on and then to remove it because it starts to roll like that. And wipe the excess here. and make sure that there are no air bubbles trapped underneath that here. And we take this little cut up piece, like wipe the water off here and also make sure that there are no air bubbles. And then I also have this, this here that you might remember from my painting. Strips that are actually have the perfect size. We need that because this is still moist, obviously, and we want to have a place where we can put our dilution helpers, which are these. If in case you don't know what these are like dilution helpers which help you to find the right consistency for your paint every time, really simply. For this you check the how for example the paint should cover up here against these little testing dots down here. They're also two-sided. So when we in our videos, for example, say that we need a light base consistency color, then this is how the color should look when you let it like dry on these test dots. And then you have a couple of tries to try out finding the right consistency. You don't have to use the exact same spot obviously underneath here, but you can just see what you need and then compare it with the one above. And if you're really quickly, you can also wipe that with a paper towel too after using that. It's something that you can also recycle. The surface of that has the same properties like a base coated miniature. Actually, we put quite a lot of time in developing that and finding like the right layering. So yeah, we call that a mojo surface that it is now. And also they come in red and blue. The red is and blue is because a lot of people have a color insufficiency, a color deficit, so to say, so they cannot really see warm and cold colors so well, like they cannot distinguish between them. So this is it doesn't say that you can only, for example, use this with blue color and this one here with red. You can use it with any color you want. All right, so we have these little dilution helpers, and then I put a warm color dilution helper up here and the cold color down here, so they will not soak with the paint. I also have with the water. I also have some blue tack here, so that won't move too much when I paint. So I can push it down here. And then for the lower part here, I'm using these little cards also to communicate which technique I'm using. So for example, for loaded brush, when I would be painting loaded brush, I put this down here, and it's good to go. Like all of the information is now on the wet palette. I've also started to change into plastic foil like that, because the paper here also gets really soaked with water sometimes. And yeah, with a foil like that, that's just perfect. All right, that's about it. That's the brush setup and also the wet palette setup that I use. I hope you found this interesting and useful. And yeah, thank you very much for listening and have a really great day. Goodbye.